Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is start out with a gesture of the face. This is going to provide our underdrawing for our later stage, which is hatching and inking. So remember, we have to think about the skull first, and I'm using a pencil that's approximately an HB. So thinking about the cranium of the head, and then the sweep of the features. And since this is a 3/4 view, remember that we have that plane that runs down the middle, which is where our jaw is going to attach. So again, we're thinking about gesturing that in, and I'm going to have to make it a little bit darker so that you can see it. So basically we're just looking at a skull. Now remember, in a 3/4 view, unlike the frontal view, the features are going to be pushed off to the side. So you're going to see that center line of the features here, which runs down as a line of symmetry down the forehead, the nose, in the middle of the lips, and through the chin. So you can see that I've kind of thought about it in those terms. Now the next thing that I want to do is, keeping in mind that the hair is not the top of the head, that in reality the top of the head is probably going to be more in this zone, right? The distance between the top of the head and the middle of the eyes gets us down to about the bottom lip. So if we look at the overall whole, we can see that from the top of his hair to his eye is the same as from the eye down to the bottom of his chin. So if we look at this and we try to figure out where the center of it is, a little bit lower, we can see that his features, as far as the eye is concerned, line up about right there. And you'll notice that the eyes are on a slight slant, so I'm going to slant that axis down just a tad. You'll also notice that the lips are at a similar slant. So if this is the corner of his eye, right here, we want to see how many eyes does it take to get to the outer boundary of his face. So if I measure that eye and I bring it over, you can see that that gets us to the outside of the face. So the distance from here to here is equal to the distance from here to here. So if we take this distance and we divide it in half, that means his eye, or oculus, is going to fit in this area. His nose is going to come down from his brow in. Now, where's the bottom of the nose? That's what we don't know. Well, there's several ways to figure it out. We know that the tip of the nose is almost to the edge of the cheek, and that there's an angle in this direction. So if we get that same angle over here, then we know that the nose touching the cheek is about where the tip of his nose is going to be. And then we also know that if we lay a vertical grid line from the corner of his eye to the corner of his nose, that's where the edge of his nose is going to be, as far as that nostril. So the nose is going to fit approximately in this zone. And what I want you to notice as we're doing this is that there's a side plane and a frontal plane to the face. Now the tip of the nose tends to be a spherical shape. So again, as we start to look at breaking down those secondary shapes, we can see that the tip of the nose is kind of a spherical shape and the nostril is kind of an oblong shape. So I'm just breaking it down into simple parts. Now, where is the lips in relationship? Well, if I look at this space between the bottom of his nose and the top of his lips, it looks to me to be about the same distance as maybe an eye's distance. So let's go ahead and get that eye in. And take that eye, bring it down, and make a guess as to where the top of the lips are. And that looks about right. And what I notice is that the philtrum and that V shape in the nose is directly underneath the center of the nose. So this is where that V shape is going to be. Now, because he's in 3/4, we're not seeing the lips from a frontal point of view, we're seeing them from a 3/4 point of view. So this side is the difficult side because it's foreshortened. This side is not so difficult because it's right underneath the center of his eye. So if I find the center of his eye and I drop a line down, we know that about right there is where the corner of his mouth is. Now if I look at the distance between the top lip and the bottom lip and the bottom lip and the chin, they're approximately the same, meaning that the halfway point between the top of the lip and the bottom of the chin, which is about here, is where his bottom lip is going to be. And that leaves room for the chin, which is in here. Now the chin tends to be a ball shape as well. And you'll notice that what I'm doing now is I'm gesturing in, like I did with the nose, these cross-contour planes. And I think I neglected to mention that a minute ago. In these extended gestural drawings, it's not just about the edge of the form, it's also about thinking about the mass of the form. So thinking about the fact that the cheeks are relatively rounded. That the mouth itself and the chin have a rounded quality to them. Now this other side of the lip, I'm just seeing a negative shape here. Outside of his face, so looking at it from this way, I can start to see a contour that will help me get that shape. So really paying attention to that edge is going to help me to get the shape of those lips better. Lips themselves are rounded, so thinking about roundedness versus the planar top lip is going to help you to start to express that form. The glabella is relatively flat. Now, as I move up, I'm starting to look at the negative space outside of his face. To help me to understand that shape of, say, the eyebrow, where it sits, the indentation of where the eye is. So the eyebrow is going to be in here. We've got this large space above his eye, and then his eye. Now, because we're seeing it from a side point of view, the eye is not going to be an almond shape, but it's going to be kind of a less than shape, meaning less than in this direction, or an arrow pointing in that direction. I think you can see that. That's a good way of simplifying things. Now the forehead is going to be sort of round, so to go ahead and gesture in that cross contour idea of roundness is going to help you to understand the directionality of the form. And then I can see his hairline here. Now I don't know where that hairline is. There's a point right here. So what I can do is I can triangulate from the corner of the eye, which I know, to that hairline, which I don't know. Just to make sure, I could triangulate from the inside of that line to the hairline and see if that lines up with the same spot. And if it does, then we know that that particular spot is where the hairline is. And then we have this coming down, and then we can see that there's about an eye's distance between the corner of the eye and the hairline. So I move my line over, and then that's where the hairline is going to be. Now you'll notice that the forehead disappears behind the hair here. Now another linear relationship would be, what's the relationship between the eye and the ear? So if I draw a straight line over, the ear is just a little bit above that line. So if I draw the line over, I can see that the ear is going to be starting in such a way that the top part of it is just above the eye. And then the hair in the back of the head emerges from behind the ear. The ear is kind of shaped, and what I like to do is kind of exaggerate the shape. Now the bottom of the ear is in line with the nose, so if I draw a line straight over from the nose, I know where the bottom of the ear is. And then his ear kind of a very angular ear. So this is where his earlobe is going to be. Now you'll notice that the neck emerges from behind the earlobe, kind of halfway along this angle here. The neck is always much broader than we think. The other side of his neck, where that shirt is in line with the corner of his mouth. So about right there is where the other side of his neck is. This place where the hoodie goes behind his neck is at an angle like that from the mouth. So if I draw an angle like that from the mouth, that's about where I'm guessing the hoodie is. I can triangulate from this point, which I know, to that hoodie and see, does it cross? And sure enough it does. So there's where the hoodie comes out. The neck goes behind it. There's a little triangular shape there. And then we've got this V here, which is under the corner of his eye. So right there. So we've kind of got a direction like this, and then a direction like that up, and we can curve it out as we move forward. The neck is going to be round in here. We can see that his jawline extends back and up towards his ear. Now you'll notice that right here is that plane change. So we're going to see lines that go back in space like this for the side plane versus lines that are closer to horizontal on the front plane. And you should at that point start to see the mass starting to take place or starting to happen. I'm going to add for the hair. Reinforce some of those edges so that you can see them better. There's kind of a fade on the side of his hair that goes directly down and over. See there? It's kind of like a state of Florida shape there. And that's, again, something that I think is important to kind of analogize what you're seeing. So the neck is obviously going to be round. It's got a front plane here. So those lines are going to be more horizontal. And then as they go around the corner, they're going to become rounded and more diagonal. The hair, think of it again as a mass. So you've got this part of the hair coming off the front plane, and then the side of his head lining up with that side plane that we're seeing as we turn the corner there. Now I can see that his hoodie is emerging just below his lip. I can see this large form here, not worrying about all the divisions of that fabric yet. I'm giving it a large shape first. I can also see kind of a wedge shape here. And we don't need to have all of his clothing. Now with the ear, again, you can break it up into shapes. So I see like an oval shape in this part of the ear. It has kind of a tail on it coming down. We can look at that negative space and how it's shaped. And then you've got the fleshy part of his earlobe. And that's going to help us when we divide that ear up. I'm thinking very much like puzzle pieces. I think that that's a very important way to think about the faces. So how do they fit one into another? I'm thinking the hairline's a little bit tall. I'm going to bring it down. So you can see I moved from the top line down in order to give it more of a sense of proper height of forehead versus overall face. Now, as I start to come in to a little bit more specificity, I start to look at these shapes within shapes. So far it's just been a guess, but now I can kind of think of it more concretely. those kind of areas of tone where we see differences in tone can become very valuable in helping us to understand the shape of the face and the tonality of the face as well. So it's about looking a little bit more closely at these shapes of tone that we're seeing. So in here, for instance, there's this shape above. There's kind of a trapezoidal shape there. Then that very sharp delineation between the front of the face and the side of the face. You can see a movement of shadow here. And then this kind of C shape coming down in his cheek. And if you see anything that's out of shape or needs to be modified, of course, now's the time to do it. So as you're doing this, you can start to give it a little bit more emphasis and a little bit more visual weight as far as increasing the darkness of the line. And that's going to help you see more clearly what it is you're dealing with proportionately. And also start to refine the contours of things so that they're not so angular and so that they're a little bit rounder. You'll notice I still haven't drawn a lot as far as features are concerned, because at this point we're trying to keep it very open. And mostly like a gestural mapping of what we're seeing as far as the planes are concerned. Not really, it's more about direction than it is about drawing. So we're not trying to get into the specificity of things. really thinking about the side plane of the nose versus the top plane of the nose. And underneath here you can see that the nose goes down versus the top of the nose here, which is a continuation of that movement down the nose. And you'll notice that I can go side to side or front to front like that. Now at this point I could start to draw in features. I notice that the eye is somewhat shut, so I'll go ahead and draw the pupil. Now, because he's looking in this direction, and is it a 3/4 view, we're not going to see a round shape, but instead we're going to see an elliptical shape. And to really look at these negative spaces of the oculus, the sclera, the white of the eyes, is going to be very important in understanding the shape. So the eyelid moves around the corner like that, and then the bottom comes down and around the corner like that, and then you can see again an elliptical eye. And I'm looking at that shape of the sclera. So that's about where you should be for stage one of this drawing. So we're starting off with a gesture and then moving into kind of an extended gestural phase where we start to look at the three-dimensionality of the shape, thinking about the planes and their change in space, thinking about these facets of the face. You know, these negative spaces are very important. So that shape between the eyelid, lower lid, the cheekbone, and the nose is going to be very important. Okay, so that's part one of the head hatching drawing.